it's the last video of 2020 and I'm excited. Mostly I'm just excited for it to be the end of 2020, but today we are talking about just to wrap up the year. We're gonna go through my income of 2020, what it looked like, where it came from, what my income streams were, how my books sold this year, and all of that jazz. If you like weekly videos on writing, book marketing, and book publishing, then be sure to hit that subscribe button as well as the bell notification icon. Let's go ahead and jump into the video. So I've got UA here to help me with this year's income report. I did the income report as well last year, and I'll be talking about it a little bit today, and I'll be referring back to it a little bit today because I think it's important to compare how much you've grown in a year. I am currently at my parents' house, so as you can see, UA is just out and about. You may see my parents' dog jump up here as well. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But I'm just gonna go ahead and open up my laptop and jump into it. Before I go too far into this video, I do want to mention that I have new stickers that released for the book launch planner. These are the January stickers. They are the first stickers of 2021. They celebrate the new year, and it's just a fun way to decorate your bullet journal. So if you want to shop the January sticker, I will leave it linked down below, and hopefully you'll check out some of my other writing stickers as well. So first off, let me start by saying all the charts that you see today will be referring to January 1st of 2020 to November 30th of 2020. So I'm missing a whole month's worth of data just because for the sake of this video, I thought it would be easiest to do it that way because of course December hasn't ended yet, so I don't have the full picture, but this should more or less be the full picture. You get the idea. So also note that I also want to discuss what happened in 2020 because that will kind of answer questions as to why my income is the way it is. So in February, I did one in-person book signing. My goal was to do an in-person book signing every month of 2020, and obviously that didn't happen. But the one book signing that I did do was a super successful one. One of the most successful book signings I've had ever. And unfortunately, I was getting the hang of in-person book signings right before everything shut down. Then in March, I was laid off from my full-time job. So for those of you who don't know, I used to work full-time in marketing, and then in March, unrelated to everything that happened in 2020, I was laid off just because that happens sometimes. But after I was laid off, my husband and I made the decision that I would go at my business full-time, and I've been doing that ever since. So this is the first year where I've had time to really invest into my business and invest my time into things where it would make me money to help make up for the fact that I wasn't working full-time anymore. Then in May, I released the book launch planner. You guys know what the book launch planner is. It's a planner I designed to help walk you through the book publishing process. There's a lot of templates, checklists, all of that. It's one of my favorite things that I've ever created, and it's also been a huge reason of why I've been able to continue working for myself rather than go out and find a full-time job. Then in July, I released Mr. Moon's Big Move. That is my children's book of my cat. And unfortunately, that is all that has happened this year. 2020 was hard for a lot of people, and I certainly wasn't an exception. There was a lot of stuff that I had to deal with this year that made it really hard to focus on my business. But towards the end of this year, I was able to find my stride again and kind of refocus myself. But there's definitely, like, right in the smack dab middle of 2020 where everything was just hard. But with that said, we are going to jump into the charts now and break down everything. Okay, so here is the chart of my income from 2020. I just broke it down into percentages. Same deal as last year, where I'm not going to talk about literal numbers. And the reason why I don't talk about numbers is numbers that may seem really good to me may not seem good to other people, or numbers that may not feel good to me may seem really good to other people. So I always think of success as a very relative term. It comes down to the individual person, but I still really like the idea of doing this sort of income report every year. So because of that, I do like to do the percentages because I feel like it still is a lot of fun data, but it's so I can share this information while still keeping my level of success relative to myself. Hey guys, so I am currently sitting down to edit this video and pull it all together, and I realized I didn't include what was probably the most important fact of this entire video, is that in comparison to the income I made in 2019 to 2020, I actually tripled my income in 2020. And I'm not going to talk about specific numbers, but of course, naturally, you would like to think that I would at least double, seeing as I was, for the most part, working full-time for myself for the majority of this year. But to see that it tripled just felt really good, so just keep that in mind when you see all the charts ahead. And yeah, just enjoy all the stats that we're about to dive into. Okay, so here's my income report. We have the biggest portion of my income coming from graphic design, which is 42.4%. That is my most stable form of income. It's the thing that I literally invest the most time into. But it is also the least passive form of income out of everything on this chart. So my goal is eventually to not get rid of it completely, because I do love working with my book cover design clients and my book formatting clients, but to make it a smaller portion of my income so I can invest my time into things that are more passive, and also just invest my time into things that just make me happy in general. Then second, we have Shopify, which is 39.5%, and Shopify is how I sell the book launch planner and the book launch planner stickers, and it's also how I do online sales of signed copies of my books. So all of that is encompassed into Shopify. I just didn't break down separately the book launch planner versus the stickers versus online signed copies, just because that was complicated and this was a stat that I was happy with. Then next up we have YouTube, which is 7.6% of my income. I'm hoping, again, that's something that grows over time, but for now that still feels like something that's very good to me. Then next up we have Patreon, which is 6.7. I actually closed my Patreon, I can't remember when exactly, but probably about halfway through the year. It came down to I was just investing way too much time into Patreon with way too little reward. So that's why eventually I just got rid of Patreon entirely. But as you can see, it was still a decent small little chunk of my income for this year. Then we have book sales, which is a tiny portion of my income in comparison to everything else. Everything else just does so well that compared to book sales, it's not that great. I realistically only released one book this year, and that was Mr. Moon's Big Move, which is a children's book, which is something that I designed specifically for in-person book signings. So when I'm doing vendor fairs and a little kid comes up, I have this cool children's book that I can hand to them. It's not something I created being like, oh, this is gonna create so many sales on Amazon. Like literally, I assumed it would make no sales on Amazon. And now I can't do in-person book signings until the future. So it kind of makes sense as to why my book sales were so small of a percentage of my income this year, because I didn't release anything new. And the one new thing I did release doesn't do well with online sales, and was just a passion project and was designed for in-person events. So yeah, that's a number that will hopefully grow a lot next year, because I've got some big plans for book releases next year. After regular book sales, then we have book signing. For my literally one book signing I did, it accounted for 1.4% of my income for this year. And it's really unfortunate, because if I had just done more book signings, that could have been so much better, because I sell so many books at in-person book signings, and now I can't do that for a while. So again, that's a number that will hopefully change in the future, but for this year, that's why it's that. And then just for kicks and giggles, here's my look at last year. Last year, again, cover design was a huge portion of my income. Then we have book sales, which was 41.3% of my income. So you can see that last year, because I didn't have a lot of time with clients, a lot of my income came from my book sales. But this year, because I invested my time into different things like cover design, where it would make me more money than book sales, because let's face it, I can charge a lot more for one book cover design than I can for one book. Like realistically, I make $1 to $3 per book sale. So it's really hard to make as much money just selling books as it is doing freelance graphic design. And then you see last year I still made a decent chunk off of YouTube and Patreon, and then I had a little bit off of AuthorTube Academy. That's not something I do anymore. So it's just interesting to compare the two. So now let's jump into the quantities of books that I sold this year. So we can see this is just breaking down what percentage of books sold in comparison to other books. So I did count the book launch planner as a book, because I do have the stats of how many copies I sold, and I thought it would be fun to compare the two. So we can see that the book launch planner sold the best. It makes sense. It was something that I released. It's not technically a book, it's a planner. But again, I thought it would be fun to throw that in here. Then we have the two marketing books, Grow Your Author Platform and Book Sales That Multiply. We can see that those sold a huge chunk. We do have How Your Book Sold Itself in here as well. But I like Bethany, since she's the co-author, she's the one that owns that book. If you see any sales for that book here, they were sales that came from in-person events or online book sales. Then we have Mr. Moon's Big Move, which was my children's book that I released, which was 5.9% of the books sold this year. And then Essence, I Am Mercy, and She's Not Here are all around 8.5 to 5.9% of the book sales. Those are all books that released at least 2 or 3 years ago. So it kind of makes sense as to why that's the least amount of sales, because the older a book gets, naturally the less copies of that book you will sell. And then for fun kicks and giggles, we can see the sales report from last year. You can see that it's kind of more or less the same, except She's Not Here was a newer release book. It didn't release in 2019, but it was still about a year old in 2019, so you can see that it was selling more copies than Essence and I Am Mercy. And I believe last year was when we released Grow Your Author Platform and Book Sales That Multiply. So you can see that that was a huge chunk of sales as well. And then again, how your book sells itself is not, I don't own the sales from Amazon. That's Bethany's book. So she has all the stats, and any sale numbers that came from here are from book signings. So here's my book sales income report. So this is talking about money I made off of the book sales. This has nothing to do with how many copies were sold, but literally how much money I made from the books. So we have 3 different categories. We have the money I made off of book signings, the money I made off of KDP, and the money I made off of Ingram Spark. So right away you can see that 43.3% of my income from my books came from KDP. That is, of course, Amazon. And then very close in second place is book signings, which is 40.4%. Now keep in mind, I only did 1 book signing this year. But the thing is, when I do in-person book signings, I can charge more because it's an in-person book signing. I'm signing the book and it's a paperback and all of that. Whereas if I sell a paperback on Amazon, I'm maybe making $3. But when I sell a paperback book at a book signing, I'm usually making at least $8. So I don't have to sell as much to make way more money. So it's a shame that I was only able to do 1 in-person book event, because if I was able to do 2 in-person book events, imagine how this ratio would have changed and how it would be way more than 40.4%. And it would have been an amazing year, because I was just finally understanding how to do in-person book events and how to really make an income off of it. And then in-person book events for right now are not going to be a thing. And then of course we have Ingram Spark with 16.3%. Ingram Spark only handles my expanded distribution, and of course we know that Amazon is really the ruler of all online book sales, so it kind of makes sense that Ingram Spark is such a small ratio, but yeah, you get the deal. And then to compare from last year, we can see that again, signed books was a huge percent of my income from my book sales. But the funny thing is, last year I think I did about 10 events or so, and even though I did so many events, I didn't make as much as I did this year with 1 single event in comparison to my book sales on Amazon. So just some food for thought of how maybe when one day we can do in-person book events again, how beneficial that can be towards your book income. And one of my favorite reports is my expenses reports. So I kind of do this thing where I record all of my expenses for tax purposes, but then I also break it down into a category of what that expense was categorized. So I have things like expenses for YouTube, expenses for cover design, and the 10K writing challenge, and events, and business, and learning, and the book launch planner. So yeah, this is just, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but this is just a breakdown of where my expenses were put. You can see I put the most money invested into the book launch planner because that's something that made me a lot of money. I put the most money invested into cover design because I have to buy stock photos. I have to pay for the software that I use. And then you can also see a huge chunk is for office supplies. This is stuff like printers and ink, and my puppy is squeaking a toy, so please ignore that. And then you can see there's also a decent chunk from what I qualify as emergency expenses. I had my laptop break earlier this year, so I had to pay a big chunk of money to get that fixed. But yeah, and the reason why I break it down this way is so I can also break it down another way. I break it down as to whether did I need to spend that money or did I not need to spend that money. And the reason why I did that is because this is what the chart looked like last year. where 53.2% of the time, yes, I absolutely needed to spend that money on my business. But the other 46.8% of the time, I did not need to spend that money. And it was an expense that I could have avoided. So I am very happy to say that this year in 2020, this is what the chart looks like. I needed to spend money 93.7% of the time. And I probably could have saved that money 6.3% of the time. So a huge difference, whereas last year almost 50% of the time I was spending money on my business when I didn't need to, and this year I didn't have that much of a problem. And stuff that I would qualify as not needing to spend money is stuff like ads and paying to go to events and paying for like learning and courses. Like I was just a sucker for taking every single course, and it wasn't always beneficial for me to pay like, I don't know, $1,000 for a course. And while I think courses are great, I was just paying for way too many of them, and I was going to way too many events that weren't beneficial for me, and I was paying for ads that weren't giving me money back. So the bit you see here, that is the 6.3% of the time where I didn't need to spend money, most of that chunk of money was on ads. And I'm happy to say that now that when I do ads, they're much more beneficial and they actually make me money that rather than make me spend money on doing ads. Okay, so that is it. This was the last video of 2020. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope that maybe you got some information out of it, that maybe a lot of things changed in 2020. It was, again, the first year where I depended on myself for income rather than my full-time job, so I had to really change up where I focused my time. And I'm walking into the new year with a new sense of focus and a new sense of what I actually want to do, and I'm hoping that this channel will be an incredibly not only educating place, but a place where I can share my journey. So let me know how you guys did with your business in 2020. If you felt like, despite all the failures, because I know I had a lot of failures this year, if despite all these failures, if you feel like you still came out at the end of the day as a business that has grown, as a person who has grown, and as a person who is eager to move forward. So again, that is it. This is the last video of the year. I will see you guys all next year.